Welcome to Caregiving Club On Air. This podcast is dedicated to the millions of family caregivers who want wellness tips and self-care solutions, who seek expert advice, and who want news about healthy aging and how to create well home design in our forever homes. I'm Sherri Snelling, a corporate gerontologist, author, and educator, a TV interviewer, host, and news commentator. I'm joining you from Southern California, where our interviews and news take us all across the country to explore the many ways to help you on your caregiving journey and to lift you up here at Caregiving Club On Air. Steve Popovich, who's the founder and CEO of Theora Care. And by the way, I've been doing some consulting for this startup company because I believe in them so much. They are really wonderful. They're smart in the way that they're looking at their products. They're really mindful about making sure that these products work for older adults. It's not just a great idea. It's also another great tech idea, which we see all the time. They actually think about the population of both the older adult and the family caregivers, by the way, because they talk about this being a caregiver solution, meaning us as family members. So Steve's going to tell us all about some new news that they have around not only detecting, but maybe preventing falls. And also this great news story, so heartwarming because it includes dogs, but it's a story about a gentleman with Alzheimer's and how Theora Care was one of the three heroes in recovering this gentleman who wandered off in Detroit. So here's my interview with Steve Popovich. So I am really thrilled to have my guest on this episode because I've actually been doing some work with him and his company, Theora Care, and that is Steve Popovich, who is the founder and CEO of Theora Care. So Steve, welcome to Caregiving Club On Air.
Thank you, Sherri. Thanks for the invite to be here.
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned, the first question we always ask all of our guests is, where are we talking to you from today?
I am in Austin, Texas, or outside of Austin, Texas. So
the great state of Texas.
Yeah, so I'm nearby where Willie Nelson lives.
There you go. There you go. Well, as you know, I live in California, and a lot of my friends have moved to Texas. So
yeah, we got a lot of Californians here.
I was going to say, all the crazy Californians are moving to Texas. Anyway, I want to just thank you so much for being on the show today because you've actually got some really interesting news we're going to talk about. But what I want to start with is just give us, an overview of what Theora Care is, because I know when we go to your website, you talk about you are a company that really produces and creates caregiving solutions. So what is Theora Care?
So what we are is essentially a virtual partner for family caregivers. We have some professional caregivers as well. We have a lot of customers that will have caregiver teams. In the caregiver world, which my wife and I became caregivers about 9 years ago for my in-laws. My father-in-law had Alzheimer's. That's how we did a lot of focus initially with Alzheimer's. My mother-in-law, he passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately, fantastic guy. My mother-in-law is on hospice right now for the last 2+ years. But it varies all over the map as far as the level of care, in the situations. And then you got people that are very proactive, and they'll start, doing caregiving type functions early, whereas in some cases you wait for a catastrophe before caregiving kind of begins. They look for products like ours.
Right.
So, it's usually it's not a situation where the caregivers are hovering over the loved one, 7 days, 20 hours, 24 hours a day, which is possible because caregivers also have lives, and our lives change. And we're blessed to be able to care for our in-laws, for example, last few years. But what we're doing is we're giving tools to those family members to be able to kind of have their life, a little bit of their life left, as well as being able to effectively care for the loved one in any situation. So, Alzheimer's is probably going to be our focus today, but we do a lot of other kinds of long-term illnesses too, Parkinson's, autism, and things like that.
And I think I love the fact that you call yourself a virtual partner to caregivers. So, very often we see companies that market themselves as, we're going to replace you as the caregiver. And I think that's not the right That's not what caregivers want. Why? We still want to be there to take care of our loved one, but we need a little bit of help, and certainly we need break to participate in our own lives. So what's interesting and that I love is that you have based a lot of the products, in fact most of the products, around what you call situational awareness technology. Tell us what that is.
Yeah, so situational awareness is a term that's used a lot in other markets, like the military, for example, use it. But what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to understand not, clinically what's going on with the person that you're caring for, as much understanding kind of what's happening with, the rhythms of their day. We have a platform called Theora Rhythms, which is part of our back-end platform that understands kind of what's happening in the environment, even though you're not there. So you kind of like being there without being there, kind of a thing. And that's, our caregivers aren't always even local to the person that they're at least participating with, maybe as a team, a family team of people involved with using our technology. So understanding, everything from, what time did mom get up? What time did she go to bed? What time, how many steps did she take today? Understanding kind of, is that normal or is that unusual? So we adopted that approach first with fall detection. We call it smart fall detection. And we employed a technology, it's AI based, which is a loosely used term these days, with what's called neural network technology, which allows you to take data and to teach a system to be able to understand kind of what's normal and what's not, is one of the things. And also understand uh, more accurately falls. With geriatrics, the challenge you also have is you have, hard falls and soft falls. So our long-term goals are to be able to even understand how to predict when somebody's at a higher fall risk. And we've collected over 1 million data records, from our users to date to be able to analyze that data. We're employing people in the data science communities to be able for us to be able to properly interpret some of that data.
And I think that's so exciting. I know that you have recently announced your smart fall detection, which is perfect for this episode because we're right in the month of National Falls, Prevention and Awareness Week, which comes up on September 23rd. But what I think is great is that you're supplying the technology that lets people, older adults in particular, obviously, still live independent lives, gives the caregivers more data so that they feel like they can maybe, intervene or be better caregivers. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of the feedback that you get from your customers on how well this technology and your products are helping them.
Yeah, so by employing this platform, this AI neural network type platform, one of the things that with smart fall detection, for example, people, that's a term that's used in a lot of different products, but when you have fall detection, one of the issues you've got is to be able to understand also false alarms or minimize the false alarms. So a lot of products that are on the market today, even from very large companies, are acclimated toward millennials. So you're riding a mountain bike and you fall. That's a catastrophic event. You have an auto accident, and the impact of that accident, even at a low speed, is really significant from a sensor perspective. What we've done is we're taking that to a much higher level that's focused into the geriatric space. But the false alarms, of course, for people that might be caregivers, are just going to kind of well, it's they're not going to be able to believe, for example, that there's a problem, with their loved one. They'll lose confidence in the technology. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of went overboard. We actually delayed launching smart fall detection until we thought we had a product that was head and shoulders above, the present market. And I think we do today, and it's getting better all the time.
And I think that's really important for our listeners to understand because I know that, some of their maybe older parents, those of you out there who are caregiving for older parents, they may have an iWatch or whatever, but and you might be able to find an app about fall detection, but you've really kind of also taken it, you're taking it to the next level because I read that your false positive readings, you have a 90% accuracy rate. So I remember when the Fitbits first came out, and if you wave your hand or clap your hands, it would count as a step. And it's kind of the same thing, right? I mean, if your parent
Yes.
is wearing the Theora smart wearable smartwatch, they may not have fallen, and you want that kind of precision in the data. So tell us, and that's really your neural networking technology, correct? Or what
Right. Yeah.
provides that?
Yeah, one of the big differences there is that we're watching before, during, and after fall or suspected fall. So, for example, before the fall, the sensors are operating all the time while you're wearing the device, the watch. And if there's we call them anomalies. If there's an anomaly that occurs, because there's certain a level of intelligence inside the wearable itself, is that there is, since we're basically like a very small cellular smartphone, is that we have that cool connection back to the cloud, to the cell network, where we can process data. So if we think that there is a situation with these anomalies, that connection's made, into the cloud through the cell network. Our back end has a bunch of heavy processing that can look at data in real time and understand, for example, how to kind of hash out, is it a fall, is it not a fall? So and then look at what's happened after the suspected fall. Because, for example, in a case with somebody walking down a hallway and they bump their wrist, that the wrist that may have the watch on it against around a door jamb, that would be a catastrophic impact and an alarm on most products that are out there, because they're looking at that inertial impact primarily, and they're not looking at what happened before and what happened after. Since we're doing before and after as well, we can say, okay, there was a significant impact, but Steve was continuing to walk down that hallway like he was before this, the impact was recorded. And that makes all the difference in the world as far as the false positives and the false negatives, for fall detection. That's why we
Yeah,
even name it smart fall detection rather than just fall detection, because
right.
it is
Well,
different.
and for our listeners out there, we know that 1 in 4 adults over 65 will have a fall, typically at home. We also know that once you've had that first fall, you're at higher risk now for a second fall within the next 3
Right.
years. And so often a lot of the older adults, then they pull back from being socially engaged or still going out and doing their walk, maybe in the woods or riding their bike or
Right.
whatever. And what you're giving both the older adult and the caregiver is more of that confidence and that data that, hey, you can still do things, and we're going to help predict, what's going on here, right?
Right. Well, since we're collecting data, that's a really good point. Is that we could see, and you're right, falls, basically have a pattern too. So if you look at it from a faraway view, and you're collecting information over, let's say, several months, is that you can see a loved one where they're going to become, more prone to fall just because of the stats on those kinds of things. And in our case, what we're also trying to do, rather than just detect it, is to be able to give information to a caregiver that they might be able to be proactive. Maybe physical therapy, like with my father-in-law's situation, he had a bad knee. So physical therapy was part of the process for him to be able to enjoy, higher quality of life longer, because of the effectiveness of the therapy. We could see changes, for example, in his walking gait, when he did more therapy and less therapy.
Right.
So there are some things that these tools can provide information for caregivers to help keep their loved ones maybe semi independent longer, and safer.
So I just want so our audience kind of can picture this. Obviously, we're talking about smartwatch, a smart wearable, which is very fashionable looking. And I know you've got great designs and faces that can be changed out and all that, but it's also very much designed for an older adult with, there's a simplicity to it. But also tell us, okay, so what's the connection then to the family caregiver? Tell us about the other pieces of it, the app and also the automatic kind of connection and communication.
Yeah, so we have an application called Theora Pro, and that's the caregivers can have. And you can have as many copies as you want, basically paired up with the wearable device that your loved one has on. And there's information, they call them notifications, that appear on the user's phone, without running the app. They don't have to have the app turned on. So, for example, if my mom drops her Theora Connect watch on a charge cradle, is I'm going to get an immediate notification. My brother and I will get an immediate notification that that's happening. If she were to to fall, for example, we get a notification. If she presses the SOS button, she gets, we might get a call, for example. Well, that call might also go to somebody else, but we get a notification that the call occurred as well. And then battery information, understanding kind of the health of the device, because part of the hidden stuff that we're doing in the background is, that device is for a Theora Connect product is typically checking in every few minutes to make sure everything is working properly. And then the app also allows the caregiver, because part of it, part of our application, it also has what we call safe zone. So if like for my mom's situation, if she leaves her house, I get a notification that she's left her house. I can also set up a safe zone, for example, at the pharmacy area in town, which is about roughly 10 minutes away by car. And I can get a notification that says mom arrived at the pharmacy. So and then I get another notification that says mom has arrived back home. Now, with our product, you can also, as a caregiver, you can also say, I don't want all that noise. I just want to know this or that or whatever. So I can filter out some of that information. But for my personal journey, with being a caregiver, also for my mom, who's in a different state up in the mountains, all that little tidbits of information give me confidence that everything's normal, everything's okay. If I think
Yeah.
something there's an issue, I can press the Quick Connect feature on our smartphone application, and I instantly get two-way voice communication with my mom. So, a few weeks ago, her battery died, for example. She pressed the SOS button and called me immediately. We talked, everything's good. The weather was good. She was at a gas station, for example. So somebody was trying to help her. We organized a call to the AAA. They were there in a few minutes. And, it's one of those things where as a caregiver, even though I'm way remote, 1,000+ miles away, is that I get a lot of peace of mind with that, which is a great value. But my mom also doesn't want to leave where she lives. She's got a fantastic high quality of life. And she got her cats and dogs there up in the mountains. Anyway, life's good for her. So my brother and I can just kind of keep tabs on her, in a real time type
Well,
basis.
I think that's the goal, right? I mean, we know our loved ones want
Yes.
to stay in their homes as long as possible. They want to stay independent.
Right.
They don't want like remote monitor cameras looking at them, all day
Yeah.
long. So this is kind of a bridge to, okay, I can know that mom's okay because she lives alone. And she can still do all the things she wants to do, but she also knows I'm here and I'll know if there's an issue. I want to take us now to you had some really fantastic news recently, and I know you've done some work and really collaborated with a lot of law enforcement agencies, but there was a Detroit news story that just happened, and a lot of our listeners are caring for loved ones who have Alzheimer's or dementia, and we want to keep our loved ones at home as long as possible, but we know that there's a wandering issue with about 6 out of 10 of those adults who have Alzheimer's. And Theora Care became part of the hero of this story. So tell us what happened in Detroit.
Yeah. So what happened in Detroit is, a couple again living, on their own. They purchased one of our wearable products a while ago, and the husband is the one that had the Alzheimer's, and he's, Alzheimer's, is a long journey in most cases. Pretty good health, but wander. Like you said a minute ago, 60% of people with Alzheimer's will wander at one time or another, and it's really terrifying, especially in this case where it was very early in the morning, and he got up quietly without waking up his wife, and just left the house. And he wandered quite a ways, several miles away from his house. When the wife woke up again early in the morning, she realized that he was gone. Checked her app, found out where he was, notified law enforcement, and they had some bloodhound dogs that were really helpful, because the area where the person was found was basically open field space with grass or some kind of grass that was roughly about as tall as he was. So he was just in this jungle of grass, and the watch was we were able to get the area of the town where he was, because he could have gone any direction, of course, right? And we were able to allow law enforcement to kind of narrow this down to roughly an acre or two of grasslands. And the news report, I think it was on NBC, that we have a link on our website that kind of shows what what the environment looked like. It was it was one of those kinds of things where if he was quiet, for example, if he was a foot away from you, a couple of feet away from you, you might have missed him completely if you were searching for him without the dogs.
Right.
So it was a pretty incredible story, and the wife, was very appreciative, and notified us about what happened. But we have and we have law enforcement agencies, because of the challenge of finding people with Alzheimer's. Instead of being many hours, and I think the average cost was quantified by one of the big organizations we're involved with, Project Lifesaver, which works with law enforcement agencies across the country for Alzheimer's specifically. Find searching, and these costs I think average about $16,000 to $17,000 per situation, per agency. So the law enforcement officers have a lot to do, a lot on their plate. So with our products, we have hundreds of users across the country that basically have kind of alleviated all the stress of somebody being missing, because they, in a lot of cases, the loved one, the person that's a caregiver, is the one that actually just goes and finds the person that's lost, and then they take them home. So it's not a crisis type of situation in those cases. They usually find them within minutes, and rather than hours, that kind of stuff. So it is really it's a big impact
Yeah.
as far as
Well, and to the,
situation.
again, just to emphasize to our listeners out there, particularly if you have a loved one with Alzheimer's dementia, this is one of your biggest concerns. And as you said, I think they found this gentleman within 90 minutes
Right,
because they knew where to look, because the wife
right,
had the app. She was able to pinpoint him through the GPS pretty accurately. I know those GPS technology can get, sometimes within a few feet or yards. And then, as you said, then the canines came in and they could
right.
really track him. So it was a great collaboration, but it's another reminder to us that we do have to look at these tools and these services if we do want to keep our loved ones at home and protect them as much as possible. Which I think is, and it was a great story. I just thought that was like so uplifting. One question I have is, a lot of our listeners may know that sometimes an adult who has Alzheimer's, if they even have their own watch, or this new watch now, this Theora Connect watch that they would have to wear so that we could track them, they like to take them off. So what is the solution for caregivers who have a loved one who may like to take things off and then it wouldn't be useful? What do you do for that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big issue. So what we did in the early days, we designed a proprietary locking clasp. So it requires a key, that we provide to the customers, the caregivers, and they can unlock it, and lock it, once they put it on the other loved ones. So they don't have to worry about that situation of being removed, because most cases is that the caregivers aren't in front of their loved ones throughout the day. So the idea
Right.
there is that, okay, I've got peace of mind as the caregiver, because I know it has a locking clasp. If I want to take a look at my notifications, for example, I could press a button, I can figure out mom's at home, kind of a thing. So again, that's really for me as the caregiver in a lot of cases, right?
Right.
Uh, but it really kind of changes my stress level, as far as understanding
Yeah.
what's going on, and knowing that also the technology is working. Like I said, we have this heartbeat process that works in the background, so that we are really an enterprise type of a solution that's being offered for this really important, personal application.
Sure. Well, and again, in this situation, the wife was asleep. She had no idea that
Right.
he had just gotten up and left the house, and that's very typical. We hear those stories, and
Yes.
in the past,
Yes.
they often had tragic endings because we didn't, as you said,
Yes.
we don't know where to look. The police, they have nowhere to guide them, and it could take hours, days, and then unfortunately
Right.
we can have a tragic ending. Let me circle back to, you mentioned your mom. I know that you're a long distance caregiver for your mom. You mentioned
Right.
that. And I'm just curious because you use advanced technology. You've kind of helped us understand the neural networking that you use, which I know is advanced, and that's proprietary to you and Theora Care. You also use artificial intelligence, and people hear that word AI now, and they think, "Ooh, I'm not so sure about that." I mean,
Yeah.
the tech industry loves it, and everybody has to have it these days, it seems. But the consumers are still like, "Wait a minute, what's going to happen to my privacy and all that?" How did you overcome that, both with your mom personally, but also what do you do to help customers understand that their privacy isn't going to be invaded with this technology?
Yeah, that's a really good question these days because AI is everywhere. I think every day now there's AI is mentioned a dozen or more times, at least in my life, for other things besides what we're doing. And the other challenge, of course, is where is that data? Who owns the data, and where is that data being, used? And in the consumer world, like a search, you use a search engine or something like that for some kind of product. All of a sudden, you get pop-ups for all that kind of, those kinds of products or products that are synergistic to that search thing. We're not selling that information. The information we're collecting is really just for our own internal use for to make our systems smarter. So if we're using that neural network to train the systems to be able to add more value to the end user. So one is security, because you also hear about these data breaches and things like that. So we are, best practices, security. Again, it's an enterprise type of a mentality here, for all that kind of information. So protecting the information, and then again, we're not monetizing that information. So you're not going to see, for example, mailers are going to go out or whatever with other products for geriatric care or something like that. It's all locked up.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's really important for people to understand. And as you said, the AI in this case is helping to also personalize the data that each of the families and the family caregiver get, so that you know specifically about your loved one and what their patterns are, right? So again, it
Right.
kind of makes us better caregivers in a way. We can use these tools to supplement what we do rather than replace
Right.
us.
Well, and basically everybody is or will become a caregiver as time goes on. I mean, the cool thing is we're living longer. The challenge, of course, is as we're living longer, is that some of these long-term diseases, it could take many years. I mean, my wife and I, started becoming a caregiver for my in-laws years ago. Now my mother-in-law, or my mother rather, that's in the mountains in California, she's 88 years old. She still drives and everything. And we're trying to, my brother and I are trying to keep her quality of life high, what really wants to do, as long as possible. So, knock on wood. With tools like this, we understand where we might become more concerned or see that, using the data to be able to understand where that curve is, where, we need to get a little more help for mom, kind of thing. So that's what we've been doing for the last few years is, she needs more assistance with, her general housework, as far as people, keeping an eye on her as well, neighbors understanding kind of, what's happening. But one of the most challenging things, of course, is with the elderly, is when they can't drive anymore, things that go safely, things like that. So
Right.
understanding if my mom, for example, she has doctors that she uses. She was in the medical field for her whole life, and so she leverages a lot of the skills that different areas for long-term health. And for me to understand, these long trips you might take to a doctor, which is about roughly an hour down the mountain, that's a pretty treacherous trip. Now, fortunately, cell phone coverage now is, all these highways, you don't see call boxes anymore and things like that because the cell phone carriers are covering all that space really well. So
Right.
we can understand a lot of different scenarios that might come up. And in a mountain area, of course, you also have just the weather. So the weather could become a very significant factor for young and old people. But for somebody who's 88, a bigger deal. So understanding what the weather is where she is becomes one of those other data points for us to be able to be better caregivers.
Yep. Well, and all of that information is important, as you said. I mean, we want to also be able to live our lives, but we want that peace of mind and all that.
Right,
We're
right,
getting close on time, Steve, but I just wanted to touch two other points quickly. So, first of all, just so our listeners understand, if you're really interested in what Steve's been talking about, the Theora Connect is your smart wearable that you purchase, and then there's a subscription service, correct? And you use cell
right.
service, is that correct? Cellular service for
Yes.
the what? Okay.
Yep. Everything is cellular, so there's virtually no installation, issue. It's just take it out of the box, turn it on, and charge it up, and you're good to go. We also have all of our customer support team. If you have any questions about the features before or after purchasing a product, from us, all of our tech support guys are or have been caregivers, and a lot of them involving Alzheimer's, which is really tragic. So,
Right.
but you can
So tell me,
find more
oh,
information
go
on
ahead.
theoracare.com,
Oh,
for our
good. And
products.
we're going to have that link. I know you've got a YouTube channel. You mentioned the Detroit News. We're going to make sure we feature that on our episode guide page. So we'll have
Right.
all of those great links to theoracare.com. And and just real quickly, two things. You recently were authorized by Apple on some critical alerts. Tell us really quickly what that is. What does that mean, and how does that benefit me if I'm a family caregiver?
Yeah. So the big deal here is, and this is a big deal, especially for Apple's smartphone users as caregivers. In the situation like the video you were talking about, the NBC video news story, that lady who was sleeping, with her husband at home, and she gets up, let's say at 2 o'clock in the morning, when most of us are, pretty deep REM state of sleep, is that it will override the slide switch you have, or what I have on my iPhone. There's different versions, of course, so that your the alarms that come from us will be audible, whereas everything else won't be, which is really a cool feature. And one of our engineers actually had emailed the CEO of Apple to kind of get the wheels going on this, and we're really, we feel really blessed that we were able to get their support and to integrate that into our latest firmware release.
Yeah, which is really cool. And a lot of people may not understand that, but once you get into this, you realize how beneficial that kind of override is.
Right.
And then I know we've been focused on Theora Connect, which is your smart wearable, your smartwatch, but you also have other services and products as well. And I know you've got new announcement that you can't tell us about yet, but Steve and his team are not, they're not just sitting back on their laurels out there, folks. They're developing a lot of stuff, but you've also got in-home kind of sensors and monitoring. Do you want to just touch on that really quickly?
Well, yeah, we're involved with the NIH on fall detection technology. We're working with some major universities, the population health. Here in Texas, Texas A&M is one of them. But what we've done is we're becoming kind of that the go-to place for technology for fall detection. So whether you've got, for example, a device on your wrist, whether you're mobile or you're more in a closed environment kind of a thing, is that we have solutions and technology to kind of cover all different aspects of this. But and our goal is of course is perfection. Our accuracy rates on false positives, false negatives are really kind of second to none. But but there are other things we're building here. I look at this kind of like bridge building. So for example, on things like sleep, how's my mom sleeping? Things like, these are all different, for almost anybody who's non-technical or technical, as a caregiver, understanding, some of those things make a big difference in how we could be effective as a caregiver. So
Yeah.
bathroom habits, things of that. Again, there's no cameras involved with this, so there's, as far as the challenges on privacy, I mean, there's always that question that comes up, but but understanding some of these changes in habits could make a big difference, as far as how to effectively care for somebody. So
Yeah. And as we said, I mean, even if your loved one doesn't have dementia and Alzheimer's, there's such a built-in benefit because of the wandering we just talked about. But even if your loved one is just, getting older and they're living alone, we have a lot of solo agers out there.
Right.
And if you do have a fall, as I said, a lot of older adults pull back from doing the things they love. Well, this is going to give you that confidence to keep going. And I also want to mention, because I know you also do some work with senior living, just because your loved one goes into assisted living or memory care doesn't mean that they're also being watched 24/7. So this could also be a supplement to make sure you as a family member kind of knows what's going on with them, even if they're under the care in a community, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Years ago, my grandmother lived to be over 100, and unfortunately, I had to get her into an assisted living facility. It's probably 20 years ago now, but I wish we had some of this technology for just caring for her, because some of the challenges was, well, just from a social perspective. All of a sudden, grandma is, she was kind of, she was very challenged because her whole life was about cooking. So they took away her ability to be able to have her own kitchen, in her apartment, kind of a thing. But understanding, for example, it again changes, for example, in her patterns, because there were patterns, and this is with a lot of people, or most people, is that you'll see things fall off. But I'll tell you one thing that would always bug the heck out of me, that's really easy to solve with a wearable, and that was just being able to get a hold of it, at a moment's notice. So, hey, I just want to talk to grandma, hear her voice, make sure everything's okay, that kind of stuff. Because, those days, well, I had a cell phone, but she did. Giving her one would be, useless, because she wouldn't know how to use it or things like that. But to be
Right.
able to have a wearable where she doesn't have to touch anything and I could talk to her, so
Right.
like the old-fashioned Dick Tracy watch kind of a scenario, and I can just say, hear her voice, and be, and just, be able to have a quick chat with her,
Yeah.
those
That
kinds of
just
things. That,
makes
that makes a huge difference. And when you go into these assisted living facilities, especially if the person is, and there's a lot of different situations, whether it's Parkinson's or it's, Alzheimer's or other kinds of agitations, PTSD, things like that, is they might be outside their apartment, for example, uh, and nobody knows where they are. So
right.
for assisted living, I could give you a dashboard and show, for example, all the facility, people that are on staff. Where is Steve? What's he been doing today? Kind of a thing, or because in those worlds, most of the time, the only checkpoint is, oh, Steve didn't show up for dinner. Let's go find Steve.
Right.
Right?
Right. So now you've got the family caregiver and the professional caregivers who can kind of have more of that
Yes.
information. Well, Steve,
Right.
we've run out of time, but it's just been fantastic talking to you. I think our listeners have learned a lot. And again, theoracare.com is where we want to send them to get more information. Anything else you want to share or tell us?
No, just appreciate the time.
Okay. Well, again, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much, Steve.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Caregiving Club on Air. Please hit the subscribe button to listen to us on our newest channels, Amazon Music, SiriusXM, iHeartRadio, Pandora, as well as Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, and other listening channels. Check out all the resources and article links on our episode guide page found at caregivingclub.com. Just hit the podcast tab at the top, or email us with comments and questions at podcast@caregivingclub.com. Thank you again for listening. Take care and stay well.